Welcome to the Original Self Podcast. I'm Evet DeCota, owner of DeCota Life Coaching. I'm a psychology-informed life coach exploring resilience, mindset, and the courage to become your authentic self. This is a space for honest conversations about growth, identity, relationships, and all the messy moments in between that shape who we become. Whatever brought you here today, you're in the right place. Time, I've realized that beneath all the noise of expectations, criticisms, and life's pressures, there's a version of ourselves that still exists. Let's explore what loss leaves behind, grief, identity, and who you become when someone or something is gone. Every loss changes the shape of life around it. Some losses are announced with funerals and flowers. Others happen quietly without ceremony, and nobody thinks to ask how you are doing. Loss is not just about death, it's about the absence of something or someone that once helped define who you were. Today, I want to talk about all of it, the losses we name and the ones we never do. And I have brought someone with me who has lived through many of the same ones I have. Stefan DeCota is my older brother by almost 3 years. We were very close as small children, drifted apart in our late teens the way siblings sometimes do when they're busy becoming themselves, and found each other again in our mid-20s in a way that has never wavered since. Our mother taught us to value one another and be each other's best friends. An argument has never lasted more than a few hours because it simply wasn't allowed. Stefan is a strategic business advisor with 25 years of experience inside large startups and vast data companies, working in marketing, finance, and fashion. But his real talents are not seen, they are felt. They're felt by everyone who knows him and everyone he takes an interest in. He celebrates people he loves deeply, and because he loves so deeply, loss has hit him hard and often. He has carried a great deal, and yet he still stands. He doesn't break. And that is exactly why his voice matters today. Hello, my brother. Are you ready to speak to me?
As ready as I'm going to be.
Let's start with a grief nobody names, specifically losing a friendship. When we lose a friend through a huge fight, rupture, a ghosting, a slow drift, or a death where circumstances keep us from being present, we are left holding a grief the world doesn't have a name for. Dr. Pauline Boss, a family therapist and researcher, developed the theory of ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss describes a grief that has no clear ending and no social recognition. The grief is real but receives no permission to exist. Losing a friendship fits this perfectly. There's no formal goodbye. The world does not stop to acknowledge it, but the pain is real and a shift in identity often follows. People often blame themselves or minimize it because there's no script for how to grieve someone who's still alive. Stefan, I want to start with the loss that nobody talks about. I want to ask you about friendship. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. Have you ever lost a friendship that mattered to you, not through a fight or a clear ending, but just a slow disappearance? And what was that like?
Sure. I had a friend, his name was Bruce, and we had worked together for almost a decade as I was kind of coming out and coming up. And so as a result of this, there was a tremendous amount of deepness in our friendship because he was one of the first person I confided to in my alternative lifestyle and the quest and what I had dealt through trials and tribulations and hiding before. And he was a good sounding board. He was funny. He had a good sense of humor. He was had a good heart, and he was an overall nice person. And so over time, our friendship evolved from hanging out at work to hanging out personally. And then we had that kind of what I call elasticity or that rubber band effect where as life got busy, he went into a new career and we kind of lost touch. And without any kind of fighting whatsoever, we just kind of drifted apart. Then the rubber band snapped back and we came back together again, closer than we had been the first time. Um, that led to many more years of great time and fun, and just basically picked up where we left off. And then when I started seeing someone who I'm currently seeing today and have been with for over 20 years, as one thing led to another, and then we found out that we were pregnant with our son, and so on. I think it was more than he could handle, and so I determined that there may be a great deal of jealousy. He one time said to me at a club that he was far more educated than I was, and why was it that I made so much more money than he did when he graduated magna cum laude from a top college, and um, there were other signs of jealousy that I'd never seen because I had blinders, emotional blinders on, that it was just too easy to hide behind. And so then when we found out that we were pregnant, without any kind of cause whatsoever, he mentioned that he and his partner at the time had been trying to adopt, or surrogate, I should say, and were unsuccessful. And that was the end. There was never another conversation after that. There were many, many attempts over several months and years where I would reach out to see if he wanted to have a conversation. And the only feedback I ever got was that, quote unquote, I would never change. And he no longer wanted to be a part of the fact that I would never change. And I was like, all right, I can own that to some degree. But how about you tell me what it is that I'm not changing about, or what it was that, you created enough animosity to not want to be friends anymore after all of these years, and visions of, sitting in rockers on a porch in the long future, and, just watching time go by. And so after years of attempting, the amount of communication that now occurs is it's a 5-minute discourse back and forth, and that's it. So one time a year for 5 minutes is when we speak. I
Yeah.
see him from time to time on social media. I don't respond to him. He doesn't respond to me, or outreach, I should say, to either one of us.
I just want to interject, like it sounds, ouch. It sounds like it would hurt. That's
Yeah, I will tell you, I mean, I think it's over now as far as the hurt. But for years, it was the unexplained that was so hurtful. Not knowing what you've done wrong with someone who just disappears. If you don't like me, tell me. If you don't like something I'm doing, tell me. I have a big, broad set of shoulders for criticism, even if it's not necessarily always constructive, but at least I'd rather know. I'm the kind of person that you tell how it is. And if you can't tell how it is, then you're not genuine. And if you're not genuine, I'm probably not interested in you. The loss of that, and the loss of, it wasn't even that he took away the ability to rectify. It was more so that he didn't put a name or a condition or a series of facts on what occurred. He just basically disappeared.
Yeah, that's the ambiguity part, right? Where it's just like, well, what happened? It sounds like you tried to find out over and over again, but sometimes I guess you just have to accept it. And it sounds like you have, which is great. Losing that friendship, do you think that it changed how you saw yourself?
I think it opens up your eyes sometimes when you can't explain something. First, you look inward and you think it has to be all your fault. Then you allow yourself room to understand that maybe it wasn't all your fault. Maybe it was their fault. Maybe it was their own hangups. And I started recounting certain things that had happened in life, like when our father passed away and how he didn't show up to the funeral. And we were very, very tight at that point, because it didn't matter enough to him to be supportive. Or when various life events happened with my family, it was irrelevant to him. And he came from a big family and they were fairly close. So it was surprising, right? But as I examined it, I moved away from, it's got to be me. What did I do? How could I have failed? To sometimes life just changes. Sometimes you outgrow people. Sometimes the unexplained is the explained.
I recently read research that confirmed that unacknowledged grief registers in the brain as genuine pain. And the same neural regions that register physical injury are also activated, sorry, by social disconnection. The fact like that no one brought flowers for this grief doesn't mean that it's not real. And also Friendships are biological. The bonds we form with others are the same neural and biochemical systems woven into our health and survival. Same bonds. Stronger social bonds make us live longer and carry lower levels of cortisol, which is your stress hormone. And that means losing a friendship is not just an emotional loss, but one that the body registers and carries long after the conscious mind has moved on. So tell me, I'm going to ask from a male perspective. Do you think men grieve the loss of friendship differently from women? And is it something that men speak about between themselves?
Well, jokingly, I don't know how women grieve comparably.
Sure.
That said, I also think it depends on your friend set and how open you are with your friend set. So I had open dialogue with my current husband as well as with friends around the loss and what that meant and how it felt. The inability for him to see my son grow up as his quote unquote uncle, even if he wasn't a blood uncle. So those types of things, plus that sense of failure initially that is now gone. But you go through that. So with my closer friends, I would discuss that. But I think men tend to just basically shove it under the rug, right? I mean, I look at my other half, and he has a similar issue going on right now for the last couple of years with his best friend that he was friends with from high school, and has done very, very similar to what Bruce and I have experienced in that has reached out on numerous occasions, has tried to make contact. Um, no response is given. And so he doesn't know necessarily what he did wrong or how it went wrong, but this other gentleman has just moved away from him and out of his life. And I think because I went through it first, I was able to talk to him about that. But it is definitely very devastating still to Chris to this day. And he will speak about it openly about his emotional baggage associated with not knowing what and why the relationship ended. So
Yeah,
I don't know if that answers your question, but
it did.
I
Yeah,
think I just think everybody's different, right? It depends on
sure.
how your willingness and how open you are to have fresh conversation versus bottle it.
Your experience doesn't seem, with speaking to other men about it, it doesn't seem that different than my female friends and I, speaking about it. So maybe it's not so different. Like you said, maybe it depends on your friend group and how open you are. Is there a loss for you that doesn't fit neatly into a category such as it's not a spouse, not a parent, not a traditional friendship, but hit you just as hard? And how do you make sense of that grief when the world did not have a name for it?
Maybe I guess there is a name for it though. So and it will sound humorous, and at the same time, I don't think anybody truly understands the level of which I grieve my youth. Um, So, it's that has a name for it though, right? Which is aging. I don't like getting older. Where did my youth go? I would say that kind of morphs into, I think a big part of that loss though is maybe something that does not have a name to it, which is the loss of my educational ability. I'll put that as the naming convention. So I worked very hard to get into a top school that is now one of the hardest non-Ivy League schools to get into, which was UCLA. I did extracurricular work. I went through junior college, etc. To get in. I got in, I got accepted, and couldn't go. Um, the reasons for why I couldn't go are irrelevant, but I couldn't go. And so it was incredibly disappointing and stuck with me for decades. Made me feel inferior at work, made me feel like I always had to work twice as hard, made me feel like I had to prove myself twice as hard to show that I was just as educated, just as smart as someone who had gone to one of these top schools. I mean, in essence, maybe made me very successful because it put such drive into me of never wanting to feel like a failure, but I had a lot of resentment and I felt unsupported. And so as a result of all of those things, I think the loss of my education capability makes me think sometimes would I have been even better? Would I have done something even greater with my life? I don't regret where I'm at with my life, but would I have done something even different? And I don't know, maybe not, right? I've been very successful. So um, I'm happy with who I am and where I'm at. Uh, but could I have been something even greater?
But it's interesting that you took those emotions and put it into a drive and a motivating factor that it may have taken longer, but you still reached a level that people that do go to college reach. I don't know if it was better or not. I don't know if you would have been, quote, better, but it does seem like that drive really got you to where you wanted to go.
Possibly, yes. I mean, I think it must have had played a part, but at the end of the day, if you look at a lot of the very successful people in business, many of them, high school is their top education level, and some college or what have you, but they're not all these big grads of these prestigious schools. They just had ideas or brainstorms, or a lot of them were college dropouts where they had an idea that, became wildly successful. We grew up in a household where college was not pushed. And we also grew up in a household where the fear of loss, and in this instance, I will identify the fear of loss as a very supportive mom who didn't want her children to be too far away from the nest, and a very unsupportive father who didn't think that education was all that because he didn't have one and he had done decent with his life, right? And he had been successful because he believed in hard work and tenacity, which were already ingrained in us. But when you're already fighting an uphill battle where neither parent really cares too much about your education, but then after that,
Yeah.
there was nothing because they hadn't gone to college, right? And their parents hadn't gone to college. And so that college drive that is so important in life for what it teaches you and how it shapes you wasn't in them. And so yeah, I was trying to break out of the mold and be the first one to go to college from our family because I was older, and our older siblings didn't go to college. And so as a result of that, when it didn't happen, I mean, I went to some college, but when it didn't happen with being able to get into, sorry, getting attend UCLA after getting in, the failure was big.
Yeah. I agree with everything that you said. The fact that they didn't go to college, it was not, and their parents didn't go, and the generation before that, it was not on their radar. And I think sometimes parents often raise you the way they were raised, right? So they just continually enforce that generation through generation. And I guess it's up to us to try and think about it and break the mold, which is what you have done. You broke that mold and, are really encouraging your son, like, you're going to go to college, you're going to have this education. So I think that's pretty admirable. So I'm going to pivot just a tiny bit because I know of the loss in your life, your son's life, in our life. Is there anything harder than watching someone you love grieve, especially when you're grieving the same loss and there's nothing you can do to take it away?
Anything harder? Not that I've experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that I've experienced. I don't think you, as a person, understand true grief until you go through it. And then when you go through it, as often as we have gone through it, with as many different shapes and sizes as we've tried on, from slow deathing with disease that just continuously ravages the body through, you know, declines in heart capabilities and kidney functions and so on, or strokes one after another, each stroke more debilitating than the one prior, and little glimpses of hope where signs of recovery would emanate and then leave as the next stroke hit and wiped out the progress that had been made. Or you know the true depth of grief is watching what certain diseases can do to a human being and how they can take a strong and a vibrant human being living life in great shape filled with energy and hope and vitality, and just reduce them to
Illness.
nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that you learned anything from watching that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've learned, well, you can't control certain things. You can't control the future and what the future may bring as far as what kinds of illnesses that you're going to experience. But you can sure damn well hope to be as strong or to keep as strong physically to handle them as possible or as preventative as necessary to hope that they don't occur. But after the last loss, uh, I made up my mind very soon thereafter that I was going to change entirely. So I went on a crusade to reduce the impact that diabetes was having on my life, substantial weight loss with over 90 pounds in weight loss, um, picked up tennis, changed my eating habits entirely to salt and carb free and mostly vegetarian. I walk and or play tennis multiple times a week. I ride my bike. I don't smoke. I don't drink. And I'm as healthy as I can possibly be. The impact of it is I no longer feel like I was feeling. I don't feel, I feel so much different and so much more healthy.
No, that's very positive. I think sometimes when we see the death of loved ones, I think it could spiral and it could just make you, I don't know, go into a depression, not take care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally. And so I applaud you for turning it around to a positive reaction. So I think that's wonderful.
When you have children, you don't
Yeah.
have a choice. You don't get to bury your head when you have children. You have to hold their heads and your own. You can grieve in silence. You can grieve in privacy. But to the outward world, for everything that the child sees, they have to understand that there's still strength there. They have to understand that there's someone that they can go to and just fall apart, and that person's not going to fall apart with them. And there's nothing wrong with them falling apart together, but someone has to rise back up again very quickly. So it's similar to like one of those dolls that you used to punch and it would never fall over, right? Like you can take the hits and you can go all the way down to the ground, but you got to get back up fast.
So it's hard, but you're willing to go through it for, like you just said, somebody like a child that you just want to make sure that you hold up as well.
Whether it was a child, whether it was a sibling, it's always been my nature to be that resilient bounce back guy.
Mhm. Absolutely. I'm going to pivot to a different type of loss. Okay. I'd like to ask you about romantic relationships and who you were in them. Psychologists who study relationships argue that our sense of self is partially constructed through our closest bonds. When a significant relationship ends, we do not just lose the person, but sometimes lose the version of ourselves that existed inside that relationship. The habits, the routines, the way we saw ourselves reflected in their eyes. This is sometimes called the loss of the relational self. And it's why breakups and divorces can trigger a full identity crisis in some, even when the relationship wasn't a healthy one. So, with that knowledge, when a significant relationship ends, do you think that people lose more than just the person? Like, do they lose a version of themselves as well?
I don't know if I would use the word lose as much as shed. I think you shed a version of who you appear to be in the relationship. And while you're in the relationship, you believe that person and that persona exists. And so for me, three really long-term relationships and a lot of dating in between. And with the first relationship, I was young. It was fun. It was so much fun. But it wasn't going to mature because I wasn't ready for it to mature, right? So that loss was a loss of fun. With the second relationship, it was a lot more, it was a lot deeper There was a home that was purchased in conjunction together. Like life was being established, roots were being laid, bricks were being laid down for foundations. And very close to the family of my other half at that time, but just a different kind of first. It was the first experience. It was the first experience at being with somebody whose family completely and totally openly welcomed your lifestyle and who you were as a person, and they liked who you were as a person, and they validated who you were as a person, and they enjoyed being with you as much as you enjoyed being with them and such. That wasn't from your own nuclear family. And so as a result of that, um, that loss was, again, I'll call it a shedding. So I shed some of the baggage that was associated with the relationship that had gone south. But sometimes when you pack those bags, you overpack. And in that case, I overpacked by not really having much to do with the rest of the family, his family, for quite a few years, just because it was too uh, close. It reminded me of him. And unlike the first relationship where when it ended, I was sad, but at the same time, we're still friends, we still talk. The second relationship, we have spoken maybe once or twice in the last 20, 30 years. And most of the times when I had seen someone for a few weeks, a few months, several years, etc., we've remained friends. With this particular one, I have no interest in remaining friends. Um, there was a hurt that was to the core of like it definitely feels like a little part of your heart was cut out, um, but it grew back or it filled in with my current husband who I've been with for 20 years. It filled in with family, friends, children. Like it just fills in. So, your certain body parts of yours regenerate if they're cut out. Others do not. Your heart, we all know, does not regenerate physically, but emotionally, I think it can regenerate very quickly. You just got to give it the time and the space to do so.
Yeah, I agree with that. How do you think you started to find your footing again? Like as it was empty, maybe starting to fill in, how did you maneuver that?
Yeah. I sat at the house probably 3, maybe 4 years after. And my life had evolved to where I would go to work, I would come home. For a period of time, I would go on walks and so I occupied my time by not dating and not really putting myself back into the environment to be vulnerable or hurt again. So I was online looking for a dog, and I found the dog um, that I was going to get. And as I was online back in those days, AOL was the only chat messenger that we had. And Bruce, so he uh, did an instant messenger of, "Hey, what's up?" And that led to a 4 hour back and forth conversation. Um, I then went and picked up the dog. He came with me, and our friendship rekindled at that point for several more years. But yes, so I filled the void with a dog, but the dog gave me joy, and the joy made me feel like I was motivated again, and the motivation made me get healthier in physically. And then when you feel better physically, then you feel like you can put yourself out there. And so then that step led to another step, and you kept climbing one step at a time until you reached the top. And at that point, the top was just being able to be vulnerable again, or open the door to possibilities, which had I not, I would have never met Chris. So
Yeah, I like that, getting that animal, that unconditional love from an animal is what like started to open that door of climbing the first step. So I love that.
I wasn't looking for unconditional love from the animal. I was looking to love something.
Right. But you do get it. I mean, you don't even have to ask for it. You get it. So I don't know. I think that's very healing. I like that. Is there a version of yourself from a past relationship that you miss or one you are glad is gone?
I used to be really funny.
Yes.
Somehow over time, I'm not. I mean, sarcastic, sure, but funny. Like I used to be quicker witted, and I don't know. I used to be funnier. I think life has played a toll on my sense of humor. So I miss that guy that was funny.
Would you
Um,
equate funny with lighter,
and
lighter emotion?
yeah, life wasn't so complicated, right? There hadn't been so much loss. There's life gets you're as you age, life is supposed to get less complicated, and I don't know if that's always the case. I think it gets more complicated, especially if you're in my brain and you constantly can't stop thinking about things and running scenarios and running numbers and looking at this and looking at that and what ifs, right? Like I don't calm easily. Life is a lot, and it has been a lot for 20 years. And which ironically is the same amount of time I've been with Chris, and that's not the reason why it was a lot. Um, in case he's listening to this down the road, I don't want him to equate the two. But life. I just think I was funnier. So I miss that person, or I kind of grieve who that person was. In general, I'm a lot calmer. I let a lot more roll off my back than I ever had before. So I don't miss the person that was always so amped up and played such an amazing long game to try to figure out how to make sure that they never experienced loss or that they didn't experience fatigue or refusal or blocking or anything that may come from making the wrong move and negotiating, having to deal with all of the emotional um, fatigue that comes from having to manage everybody. I'm no longer everyone's handler. I'm just my own handler. I'm a lot calmer at being my own handler. I finally have been able to release it to the fact that you do you. I mean, I say it all the time, but you do you, you live your life. I'm going to live mine.
That sounds very freeing.
It's incredibly freeing.
Yeah, yeah. That's I would assume that the answer to that question is you are glad that that need to manage, that need to always help is quieted a little bit more. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Continuing bond theory is grief was understood as a process for a very long time. You move through the stages of grief. It's a theory by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she gave us the 5 stages of grief: the grief, the denial, the anger, the bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. They were never meant to be a linear checklist like many people treat it as, like, oh, you're in the bargaining stage, you're in the depression stage, right? And all of those stages do happen. I just don't think they happen in a straight line and then you're done grieving, right? Continuing bond theory challenged the idea that healthy grieving means not detaching from the person that you lost, but instead that we can maintain an ongoing relationship with those that we have lost, carry them forward with us in how we make decisions, who we are becoming, but not just abandon, like, well, now they're gone. So losing a parent also removes the people you've known the longest, the witnesses to your own story, and that particular absence reshapes identity in ways that take years to fully understand, or if we ever fully understand it. So this is the one I would like to sit with. Probably it might be the longest. We've kind of touched on it, but losing mom and dad changed both of us. And I would like to hear in your words, provided we don't start blubbering and mess this whole up, mess this podcast up. When we lost mom and dad, how did it change you? Not just emotionally, but in terms of who you are.
Well, I think it's independent. The loss of dad, I mean, you never want someone to leave and you never want someone to move on. But the loss of dad it didn't impact me the way that it did our other siblings. It just didn't. I mean, speaking raw, he didn't matter to me, right? I mean, we didn't have enough of a relationship to where that sense of loss was great. I would actually even say in some degree, I felt relief, and I felt relief from my mom, our mom, because she was no longer trapped as a caretaker. She was free. She was free. She could grieve, she could be sad, she had children with him, which I get. There's a bond that after the children are born, you can never take away the bond of having a child together. And so that from my own personal vantage point, I don't want to be heartless, but at the same time, it just didn't matter. It didn't matter the way it did to others. And I know I've said that before, but so how did it change me? It made me feel a little bit more responsible, I guess. Being the sole male in the house now, with a sibling. So yeah, I mean, he's been gone what since 20? So I mean since 2000. So he's been gone 26 years, and this year I actually almost forgot on the day that he passed and remembered, but I remembered late in the afternoon, and I didn't even know. I didn't normally I write the siblings and and say something, and I didn't. Again, that was more about taking care of myself, but it was like I just didn't. I had a sibling who um, I think went through it in a way different way, right? And I watched the grief that kind of going back to something you asked earlier, how men grieve differently. I think that our older brother had a tremendous amount of grief for the loss of dad, um, but couldn't show it. And so maybe showed it to his wife, right? But couldn't show it outward. And so I think it really ate him up. Um, and I watched what it did to you, and I know I watched what it did to Roxanne. When you lose a mom, I think, well, first off, I don't think grief ever goes away. I think that you grieve every day. Some say, you hear people say all the time, oh, it gets easier. It doesn't get easier. It never gets easier. It's just the triggers are not always as prevalent, right? So what used to be everything, every moment, every day becomes not as frequent. And then you've got the things that actually make you smile that remind you of that person, mother or father. And then you've got the things that bring back memories, right? Um, and so with that inability to ever really put it in a drawer and tuck it away, because you just can't. Um, what does grief look like, right? So you lose a mom, and for me, it was like losing my best friend.
Yep.
Yep. So there is a lot of time when I don't know, you wish you could pick up the phone. There was that, I joked about it, but there was that constant, we talk, God, 2 hours, 3 hours about nothing, 4, 5, 6 times a week. When that goes away, it doesn't matter how close you are to a sibling or to a friend, they can even be your person. They can be your ride or die. It's still not the same. It's not the same as your mom.
Yeah.
Uh,
Great. I agree.
yeah. So, did it change me? Absolutely. I think probably for the better. It made me more compassionate. It made me more appreciative. It was the first igniter to getting healthier. I didn't do it right away because, to a point that you made earlier, the loss of mom was definitely all stages of grief at one time, trying to uphold being the caretaker, trying to be the strong one, and at the same time letting myself fall apart, right? So overspending, displacement. I was displacing all of the angst and the sadness on physical objects or fancy watches, fancy sports cars, whatever it may be. And then grief would set in and I'd buy something else. And then grief would set in and I'd buy something else, right? And that lasted for a couple of years and it became exhausting and very expensive until I sat with it. And then when I sat with it, which was probably 3 years after she passed, it was the first time I was able to sit with it. I was like, all right, this is what this means, you know. And having children, you get a different sense of loss on top of your own, which is what they don't get to experience. And more so what she doesn't get to experience growing up, you know, spending more time of her life with them versus leaving with them being at young ages. They knew her, which was great. Uh, but you know, I wish they had had more time.
Yeah. Me too. Me too.
So yeah.
Yeah. We'll just stick with mom. When losing mom, did you question anything about your own identity or direction of your life? Like I heard you say the retail therapy and all that stuff. Besides your health, did it make you think, okay, I'm going to live my life this way. I'm going to go in this direction?
It definitely made me focus on my health as far as like, I don't want to, with having a child at an older age, meaning where I'm older, I don't want to leave this planet if I can help it at the same age that she was, or even at the same age that dad was, right? However, I also don't want to be older than them and non-functional. It started the pathing towards you do you.
Oh, interesting.
So, you know, we have a nephew who is incredibly intelligent, and we have several nephews that are incredibly intelligent, but this one in particular that I'm speaking to, um, he has these beautiful phrases. And so when I was thinking about starting my own consulting company, one of the questions that we would ask at family dinner, his question to the group was, "What is your why?" And I found that question so powerful, and it resonated so deeply into me that I called him after we got back from the Tahoe trip. And I said, "Hey, listen, it's a phrase you coined. You may have taken it from someone else. It may be your own. Are you okay with me using it? Because I want to name my company that." And he's like, "Oh, Uncle, I'd love to. I'd be honored." And so my consulting company is called What is Your Why? Now, why was it powerful for me? Because and I'm going to tie this back. When I sat quiet and I examined why it resonated the way that it did, that question is so perfect for life. What was mom's why? Her kids, her grandkids, her love of shopping, right? I'm joking, but travel, right? Um, being an amazing human being. That was her why. And the what was the means is how she got there, right? What is my why? My why is, or what is my what is, my what is my family always being there, being a conduit, being someone that's looked up to, setting an example. How about that? Setting an example that people can either follow or not follow, but at least look at and admire for myself. And being a good person, right? So, and I don't know why it matters to me to be such a good person. Like, you know, everybody's different with where that sits in their war chest, right? Mine, it's right at the top. You open up the lid to the war chest, and right at the very, very top is my integrity and um, compassion. And so, thinking through that, it reminded me of mom in that I knew what her why was. So, what is my why?
Yeah. Yeah. So is that how you carry mom now, today?
No. Mm-mm. Well, what you mean to the what is why? No, I carry mom. You know, it's going to sound silly because physically they're gone, but she's always there.
Yeah.
I don't think about her every hour like I used to, but she's always there. She's just there.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I think that's lovely. Anything more you want to say about that?
No.
Okay, good. The grief that's created by both parties, both friends, whatever it is. We spoke earlier about ambiguous loss, right? The grief that has no ceremony, no clear ending. Outgrowing someone you love falls into that same territory. There's no big fight, no funeral, no moment you can point to and say, that's where it ended. You were kind of talking about that with Bruce. You look up one day, you realize the distance between you has become too wide to cross, and nobody permitted you to grieve that either. Have you ever grown in a direction that took you away from people you once felt close to? And how did you handle it? I know about Bruce, but anything else?
I think the one that comes to mind probably the most prevalently is another male couple. One of the males in the relationship and I had dated off and on over a couple of years. And then when he met his current partner, we were all friends. And it was a lot of work. I mean, at first it wasn't, it was very easy and we had a lot of fun, traveled together and everything else. And then the one spouse just really had a lot. It was just a lot. And it was a lot of work. I tried and I tried because that's my nature. And then one day I thought, it's not worth it. There's so many other things that are important. And at that time, my son was just born. Um, and I had so much to be happy about. And I wanted just to be in the happy. I didn't want the drama. So I moved away from it. And I don't regret it. I don't I think about the first part, the other half, which is the person that I dated for a few years, off and on, from time to time, just how he is, and hope he's well. But they were toxic in ways that it took me a while to realize, and not harmfully. I mean, toxicity is harmful, but they were toxic to my inner happiness.
Yeah.
They weren't toxic people. They just were creating a toxicity in my happiness.
Is there any guilt in that, in the walking away?
None.
Good for you. What would you say to someone in the middle of that right now, like outgrowing people they love, but unsure how to move forward? What would you
Move
say?
forward. Move forward. Don't look back. Let it be what it's going to be. It's going to have highs and lows. It's going to feel really awkward and really uncomfortable, and live through that awkward and uncomfortable. Embrace it, digest it, expel it, right? Just go for it. You'll be so much happier on the other side.
I think that's sound advice. I like that. We've come to the very last section. I'm genuinely moved by your willingness to be vulnerable and authentic. And I thank you for that. Looking back at it all, the people we've lost, the relationships that have ended, the versions of ourselves that have changed, who are you now that you might not have become without those losses?
Well, I cry a lot more. So I would say more vulnerable, less tolerant of what does not make me happy, encouraged by the future, at peace with so much more of my life than I've ever been at peace with before, engaging, way more of an extrovert than I ever was growing up. Still not necessarily the biggest extrovert. So more outgoing in some ways, definitely more opinionated, but bigger ears to listen with, not as judgmental. Even if outbound, it may appear like I didn't really reduce that trait. Inwardly, I'm not judging anywhere near what I used to about myself, about others, what have you. And looking forward to the small bursts of joy that come with either daily activities or other events. I live for my son. I live for my husband. I live for my family. I look forward to when we get together. I look forward to when my son comes over cranky every Wednesday and Thursday, which is fine because then we still have a blast. I'm looking forward to what he does with his future. I don't know, inspired. I think I'd sum it all up, and that I'm more inspired with all of the losses. Yeah.
Do you think that inspiration, do you think that brings you closer to who you were, like your original self, like really young, not shaped yet by all
No,
the loss, stuff. You do not. You think it's an
Yeah.
improvement?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It's a freedom. I was the bunny in the hat of a magician's trick. I didn't want to ever show myself until I got pulled out of the hat. I didn't like people looking at me. I didn't want people judging me. I felt that something was wrong with me and that I was broken. No, not my who I was starting to become as my quote unquote authentic self was never who I wanted to be. This is more of who I am.
Do you think that if your authentic person was nurtured, accepted, and allowed to grow as a very young person, that would have changed your future and acceptance of yourself?
Be fun to go back and look, kind of like the Ebenezer Scrooge approach, right? I think it would have yeah, I do. I think it would have made a major difference in never feeling enough or never feeling the true sense of belonging in the people who don't worry about having to hide or, I mean, today's youth and when I grew up is so fundamentally different, right? I mean, there is no closet. The acceptance level and what is accepted through mainstream TV and movies and through controversial articles and so on. My upbringing in my youth, you were straight, that was it. You acted straight, you had a girlfriend. If you didn't tell anyone, you didn't speak to it, you never gave it a name, you never gave it air to breathe, you just squelched it, you put out the fire, and you thought you were this amazing liar. And you thought you were this amazing magician that had everybody fooled that, card trick was magic, when in fact, no one was fooled. Everybody knew. You were the last one to know that everybody knew, right? Had I been nurtured a different way or accepted a different way, I wouldn't have spent 2 decades, almost 3, feeling inadequate.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I have to say though, I wonder if feeling that way made you be a father that speaks to their child, allows their child to express whether he's comfortable with it or not, his true feelings, encourages him to be the person that he is, and only corrects if it goes off the rails. You said something to me when he was very young. I said, why do you argue with him so much? Why do you give him so many choices? Like, just tell him because that's the way it is. And you said to me, I don't want to take away who he is authentically. So for someone like you that had to hide, had to lie, had to pretend, I find it super inspiring that you did not turn around and do that to your own child when your child has no boundaries on his grief. It just goes, you're still there for him, even when you are in your own grief with things that have happened. So I applaud you for that. I really do. Last question. What's the one thing about grief that you wish more people understood?
You can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. You need to embrace it as hard as it is, and you need to move through it because you're never going to put it away. It's never going to have a nice little box that has a bow on it that you put in the corner and turn the light off in the closet on. And if you accept that, and if you realize that grief is your emotional psyche crying its way out of, or whatever you want to call it, but dealing with the love that you felt for that particular person that you're grieving. And so if you love that person for a small part of your life, for your entire life, whatever it may be, that grief, which is equated to love, you don't stop loving that person. So therefore, you don't stop grieving them. And I think if more people understood that grief is necessary. I mean, we grieve all kinds of things, right? I mean, from the deeply profound friends and family and losses to, I mean, I had a favorite Porsche that I got rid of that I should have never sold. I grieve that. I mean, I think about it all the time, right? Grief comes in many shapes and sizes and depths. It's life. We just
Yeah.
accept it.
I like it.
You know, you don't hide from it. And if you hide from it, you'll never get through it.
It's going to get you no matter what, right? Like you're going to have to deal with
Yeah,
it.
I think they should change the phrasing to death, taxes, and grief. There's three things you can't avoid.
Exactly. I like that. You could introduce that concept. I like that. Well, like I said, I want to thank you a million times over for your honesty, your vulnerability. I am very lucky. I'm laughing because I'm trying not to cry. I'm very lucky to have such a kind and thoughtful brother. I really am. And one who has fiercely shown up and advocated for me and for many. And I can only aspire to do the same that you have done for everybody.
And then I would end by saying thank you for including me in this podcast. It was an honor. Your intelligence is inspiring. It was your hidden superpower. Surprising in a great way, right? Watching what has emerged and watching these podcasts, reading what you write. I think you're the more inspiring of the two of us.
I don't know about that.
I'm just older.
Thank you. Yes, you are old. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. One man's perspective on loss and grief and how we walk through it, carry it with us, and can become more from experiencing it. For me personally, loss shows up in many ways and scenarios. I've had close friendships end, causing my confidence to diminish. I felt that deep grief that's always just right under the surface over my mother's sickness and ultimate passing. When I lost my mother and father, I realized that I was an orphan. But after time had passed, I realized a type of power in having to count on myself rather than following a familial and cultural construct. I know that loss left behind a part of my innocent original self, but merged most of her with a stronger and more able self. What Stefan and I share today is the kind of insight that doesn't come from a textbook. It comes from living. And I hope that somewhere in our words you heard something that sounded like your own story. Loss and grief are some of the most isolating experiences a human can have, and yet they are also the most universal. You are not alone in what you are carrying. As I prepared for this episode, a quote by C.S. Lewis has stayed with me. Grief is like a long valley, a winding valley, where any bend may reveal a totally new landscape. That is loss. That is life. So with that, ask yourself, what loss are you still carrying that you have never given yourself full permission to grieve? Thank you for listening to the Original Self podcast. If these reflections resonate with you and you'd like to explore your own growth, you can learn more about my coaching at DeCotaLifeCoaching.com.